Welcome to Random Radio. I'm your host, David Bolander, and thanks for listening in. Every week we discuss a random topic, whether from a listener like you or my choice. This week's topic would be Generation Z against the world. And don't forget that any opinions shared on the show are just that, opinions. And remember that if anybody says anything offensive, they don't mean to offend, they're just expressing their opinions. And with that out of the way, let's get on with the show. So I feel like me being a member of Generation Z, or Gen Z, we are very mistaken. I haven't heard a ton of this, but apparently my generation gets a lot of hate and judgment from most other living generations. And one of these things is that people think that we are addicted to technology. I personally disagree with this, but even if we are, then take note that the people who are judging us about this gave us the technology, told us how to use it, and told us when it is appropriate to use it. So where do you think we got it from? And we're just following their orders in all reality, if you think about it. They also seem to complain about all of the problems that quote-unquote we cause. And now not only do they blame us for their own messes and for their own problems, they're asking us to clean it up. And I don't mean to offend anybody out there, but this is just ridiculous. That's like your sibling making a huge mess out in the middle of the living room, and then everybody telling you, hey, go clean up their mess. And actually saying, yes, this is their mess, this is not your mess, but you need to clean it up anyway. That's what that's like. Now this can be a lot of pressure to put on anyone, right? But my question is, do they have to put it on teenagers and young adults of all people? Do they have to put it on the people who are probably the most vulnerable, who've got the most issues in their lives already? Right? Do they have to do that? They also think that we're lazy and grumpy all the time. Now this is very true, but they don't understand the reason why. Now we are lazy, so to speak, because we have just so many things to do in our lives, and so many things that we need to get done in our lives, right? And we need to rest, right? That's why we're lazy. That's why we're called lazy, is because we need rest, and we need to do the things we want to do every once in a while, right? And if we don't get our weekends, we really just can't function for the rest of the week. I know that I can't. And as for our grumpiness, a similar thing, but my generation also needs to be on our toes almost constantly, just because of social media, because of everything, right? Because if we make one wrong move, and that's one is all it takes, then we're gonna make a huge mistake, or at least that's the fear, which is why we want to make sure that doesn't come true. And these things can affect our entire lives, at least in our heads, just due to social media and so many grudges being held recently. And also, yeah. And one other thing that we as Gen Z have actually been scolded for is our lack of communication, which is actually partially justified. To be honest, it is partially justified, though it is also partially not justified. We love to work alone, for the most part anyway. At least I do. And this can leave a huge impression of us cutting ourselves off from the world, which people don't like. They're like, be social, be with other people. No, we just like to work alone. And honestly, we're growing up in a world where probably the most efficient way to communicate with people is through our phones, in all honesty. Instead of walking 20 minutes to your friend's house so that you guys can play a game of jump rope, you can text your friend, hey, meet me here, so we only have to walk 10 minutes each to go play some jump rope, right? That's how we think. And despite this major efficiency, we actually prefer human interaction over digital interaction. At least that's what I've been told, and that's my experience on it. So I personally really like human interaction way more than digital interaction, just because we want to communicate, we want to talk to you to your face, right? We don't want to talk to your avatar. We want to talk to your face. Which actually I'd love to argue is exactly what other generations do, or is it what all the people who complain about this do. They, from what I've heard anyway, then than other generations that are complaining about this, and I'm not saying everybody from other generations is doing this, but from what I've heard, other generations, they're doing this exact same thing, right? They're sitting on their couch, like they complain about us being addicted to their phones, but they're saying this while sitting on the couch eating their potato chips and popcorn, just eyes glued to either their own phone or to a TV, right? And doing absolutely nothing to help, right? If you think about it, like they are really the ones that would honestly rather talk to an avatar than to you. Like, is that just me? Do the older generations, at least from what I've heard from, I don't know, and I don't mean like everybody does this, but a few people I know do this. But do older generations like always complain about the exact thing that they're doing? Is that just me? I don't know. Anyway, we Gen Zers, we have a like completely new. We actually have a new language. It's relatively new, but we write and talk in a completely different language. Emojis and memes. Now they seem very simple and very easy to understand just on the surface, but in all reality, they're probably more complicated than the English language, and that's saying something, right? They are just, and at least I think that they are more complicated, and they're more like you need to be very skilled to understand how to use it correctly, right? Like you'd think that happy face means you're happy, sad face means you're sad, but that's not 100% right, honestly. Like, it makes sense, but not everything in emoji language makes sense. Kind of like the English language. Like, for example, I read an article the other day just about how Gen Z communicates. And it actually said that the majority of Gen Z would actually rather use the crying and the skull emoji to represent their humor or their laughter, right? Like, crying is like you're crying because you're laughing so hard. The skull would be like I'm dying because I'm laughing so hard, you know. But it's just absolutely insane to me just how complicated a language of purely pictures can be. It makes me wonder how how complicated the Egyptians' language was, and if the pictures actually meant what they were talking about. But yeah, and moving on. So I'm actually hoping to get a bit more quote unquote with the community. So if I like post any questions on the platform, I'd love to hear your opinions on stuff, right? As long as it's constructive. Don't go being mad at people and stuff. Like, be constructive about it. And it's okay if you disagree with me. I'd love to hear that too. But just try to be constructive, not destructive, because that's not going to help anybody. And one other thing, I'd also love to thank my friends and my family again, just for all the support they've given me, especially in the real world, because like I've made a lot of changes in my life, and they've been super supportive of it, and yeah, and actually, if you'd like to support me or support us, listen to the previous episode. It actually explains a way to support us and a way to be a bit more involved with us. Now, back to Generation Z. People, specifically the older generations, seem to think for some reason that the world they grew up in is the same one that we, being the newer generations, are actually growing up in. And reality check, it's not. Right? They're completely different. They're completely different worlds in reality if you think about it. We each have our own problems, we each have different solutions to those problems, and we all have to deal with separate pressures, right? Like different pressures from other generations. And I've actually heard that my generation, Generation Z, has to deal with probably the most pressures, and Generation Alpha, I can only guess that they're going to have to deal with way more pressures, just from like being connected online and stuff. But yeah, we as Gen Z have to currently worry about sustaining reputations online, And then along with that, we have to manage our real life stuff, like school, sleep, and hobbies, which is already hard enough. And my guess is that older generations didn't have their parents constantly telling them to do something, whether it be like chores, doing favors, or just getting outside, right? Like, I know that some parents aren't like this, and I know that my parents are not like this most of the time. They have their moments, but anyway, I have a few friends who their parents are like this, and I feel just so bad for them. And like, if you think about it, we have to spend at least 6 hours away from home every day, like most generations do for school, right? Plus maybe an hour of walking time. And we get about 14 hours of being awake, unless we want to lose out on sleep, which is not keeping very good balance. And then with another 4 to 6 hours is actually taken up by our hobbies or by like whatever we want to do, right? And that overall leaves 2 hours for like homework, hanging out with friends, getting ready for bed, extra rest that we might need, and eating. Like we have a pretty darn cramped schedule in comparison to other generations. At least I think so. Whenever I hear stories about this stuff, then it's like, we got to walk home for like an hour, and then we just did whatever we wanted to do, really, like go run around on the farm, right? Well, my generation, we can't really do that. It's kind of sad. I don't know, we just don't have the same opportunities, I guess, right? I don't know. And one other thing is, I also actually feel like my generation, and I don't mean to be offensive about this, but it's actually a lot smarter than other generations, right? We are way smarter than our years, and if other generations would take the time to realize that, I feel like we could, I don't know. Yeah, we know so much more about our current world than the people who actually set it up for us. At least I think so. We understand it more than other people. And we also actually have the ability, and therein the responsibility, to actually start setting up our jobs and careers and stuff from the time we can pick up a phone, right? Like, if you think about it, you can become a professional musician at the age of like 6 years old because you had a cell phone and a room. That's all you really need nowadays to be successful. That's all you really need. Like before, to be a successful musician, you had to pour like tons and tons of money into an instrument, recording gear, a teacher, stuff like that. And that doesn't even count for going out and putting yourself out there for for hours and hours in a day, right? Now you can literally have just your voice and a cell phone, and you can be a millionaire. It's insane to me. I just think that's insane. And with that, I honestly think that a lot of people forget that we younger people, the younger generations, are actually entirely your fault, or are entirely the older generation's fault. I feel like a lot of older generations forget that. Like, you gave us the phone, you gave us the world that we're living with, that you're living with, or that we're living with. And you're also, and everybody tries to ignore this, but you're also passing on a lot of your problems, like global warming. My generation didn't set that up. In fact, we're trying to fix it, and we're being tasked with fixing it ASAP, or else things are going to go downhill. And so I can only hope that my generation will not be the same. That's all that I can hope. I hope that we'll be a lot more inclusive to younger generations. And people forget that we live in completely different worlds, right? Like, the country life you used to live in isn't the same as our expansionist city lives, right? It's really not the same. And despite how much you think it might be, it's really not. And I don't know. I feel like people just need to be a bit more inclusive of the other generations and be a bit more open-minded. I don't know. And and with that, I am David Bolander, and this was Random Radio, signing off.